Okay, I think we're ready to start. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this live clean energy transition info session. You are right now in breakout room 4 on mobilizing local and regional investment projects. My name is Daniela Bachner. I am a project advisor in the Live Energy and Live Climate unit of CINEA. And I will guide you through this info session together with my colleagues, Adrien Bullier and Martin Eibl. We will cover the topics of project development assistance, community of practitioners, of one-stop shops for public assets, and facilitation structures for public authorities. But before we go into the different specific call topics of this session, I would like to welcome our colleague Pierluca Merola from DG ENER. He is our project officer in unit B2 in DG ENER, and he will give us an introduction regarding the policy context in which our call topics are placed in. The floor is yours, Pierluca. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Daniela, and welcome everybody. Indeed, I'm Pierluca Merola from DG ENER B2 Energy Efficiency Unit, and I will give you a very short introduction to the policy context, a bit to frame indeed like the different, then the more specific conversation with the colleagues on the topics. If we can move already to the next slide, it's good to recall all the time the overall framework where we are with the new commission as from the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. As you know, the commission has proposed the European Green Deal, which is the overall Europe growth strategy that will allow us to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050. If we can move to the next slide, the first, let's say, if we can move to the next slide. The overall objective of the Green Deal has been, let's say, analyzed through the climate target plan to identify the increase in ambition, which lead to increase our ambition to reduce greenhouse gas emission by at least 55% by 2030. This is our climate target that has been approved as part of the European climate law already at the different levels. So by the member state, by the different EU state, by the different ministry in the Council of the UN, by the European Parliament in what is the climate law. The climate target plan indicate, as you can see in the image on your right of the screen, clearly also the sector where more effort are needed, and you would clearly see as well that the residential sector that is key. I mean, also, as you know, in the topic that we will be discussing today, or with regard to PDA, but also with regard to the support facility for renovation in public buildings. It's where the potential and the effort are most needed. If you can move to the next slide, this is just to recall very shortly that as you know as well, the renovation wave strategy to double the building renovation rate across Europe by 2030 was published by the Commission in September 2021, September 2020, and allowed to also focus the effort as part of the recovery and resilience facility and the different national recovery and resilience plan to commit resources to building renovation, to energy efficiency in building. Now these resources are committed, they're being implemented, and it is also clear that a degree of support in terms of technical assistance, but also one-stop shop have to be provided on the ground. And I mean, it's certainly here where the LiveSet sub-program intervenes. If we can move to the next slide, I would just briefly mention also for completeness the fact that following the European climate law, the Commission has presented a huge large number of legislative file and revision as part of the Fit for 55 package in the framework of our subprogram of the clean energy transition. The most relevant are certainly the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Energy Performance of Building Directive, the Renewable Directive. These are now under negotiation at the level of the co-legislators, so in the European Parliament and in the Council of the European Union. Or at different level, let's say on the Energy Efficiency Directive and Renewable Energy Directive, we are getting closer to define the position of the Parliament and of the Member States. If we can move ahead, I would like to underline, what has been the biggest, let's say, novelties in the week, but I think in the last months and in general that have, if not changed, because it's very much the REPowerEU communication is very much based on and built on the Fit for 55 package, but he had a very relevant political and policy objective that is the phase out of the dependence of the European Union on Russian fossil fuel import. I will not recall the recent situation also for the interest of time, but it's clearly that Europe cannot anymore be and rely on the import of fossil fuel from Russia. This has came as a clear security priority as well, not only in relation to the clean energy transition. There is three main axes on the REPowerEU communication that came out on the 18th of May that invite you to check to have a look at, and the first one regard the energy saving and save energy. So both energy efficiency for the clean energy transition, but also to look at the role of energy efficiency at the junction between the clean energy transition and the energy security, so to avoid possible supply disruption. Then there is the diversification of supplies that of course do not interest our scope here, but is important to mention. And finally, the acceleration of the clean energy transition with also important update on our legislative proposal from the Fit for 55 package that led to the increase of the Commission has proposed an increase of both the renewable and energy efficiency target, and also introduce provision for the fast-track deployment of accelerated deployment of solar PVs in building as part of the Energy Performance of Building Directive. These are legislative amendments that will now feed into the ongoing interinstitutional negotiation. If you can move to the next slide. I already mentioned, I think, part of this. I would like only to underline some aspect in connection to the topic we are discussing today. It is clear that there is a need to accelerate, and I very much I believe that the core topics we are discussing today, the project development assistance, the home integration and renovation service, and the public sector one-stop shop are indeed like those kind of support that are provided from EU central level to gather pilot projects, but also solutions on the ground to enable this acceleration. Another aspect that I would like to underline is the very focus on the decarbonization of heating in buildings, but also on district heating level, also to be achieved with further deployment of heat pumps and the removal of gas and fossil fuel based boilers. And with that, I will conclude here. You have a bit more information on the slide, and I will hand over back the floor to Daniela. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Pierluca, for your very brief overview. I hope you could all grasp a little bit the policy landscape behind. I would ask you to have a look at the different files and strategies. You will receive you will be able to access the recording of our presentation today later on. And there are also these slides with all the links. So in order to give you a complete picture of this policy context. Now, what I mentioned before, what I did not mention before, is that you are welcome to ask us any questions, which we would then answer in the aftermath after the presentations. Feel free to use the chat function in this conference tool to put your questions, or if we have some time at the end, you are then also welcome to just open your mic and speak, depending on how many people we will be. So now, I would like to start with the call topic on PDA. Thank you very much. And as mentioned before, very specifically to this year's PDA call topic, we covered two scopes within it. I will now cover scope A, which is the project development assistance for sustainable energy investments, and my colleague Adrien Bullier will afterwards cover the topic on community of practitioners for one-stop shops for public assets, which is scope B. And after that, we are going to address the second call topic, the second separate call topic within this session, which is setting up facilitation structures to accelerate the renovation wave in the public sector, done by my colleague Martin Eibl. So now we dive into the PDA topic of this year and the scope A. Would you please? Thank you very much. What we aim to do with this call topic is to give project development developers the opportunity to develop an existing project idea into sustainable energy investment by means of acquiring all the necessary expertise. So covering the whole development process, starting from the business plan and feasibility study, over financial engineering, technical specifications, up till the procurement procedure. So what the financial support from the PDA call topic does is actually supporting this increase and the acquiring of the expertise to develop the individual investment projects. If you would move on to the next slide, please. What are the objectives? So clearly, the call topic aims to build the technical, economic, and legal expertise within the project developers, which is needed for the project development. It aims also to develop organizational innovation. And in doing so, the transaction costs of the project development will be minimized. We further look for removal of legal, administrative, and other market barriers, which you would address with your project proposal. And the PDA also looks at aggregation of small-sized projects in order to reach a critical size, investment size, which is interesting and appealing to investors. And therefore, the mobilization, of course, of private financing is one of the key aspects of the PDA call topic, and the actual implementation, meaning the delivery of the investments. We also look at the high degree of replicability. So we look for solutions which are either in a different sector or in a different geographical area replicable. If you move on to the next slide, please. Equally to previous years, under PDA, the eligible project promoters could be public authorities, could be public or private infrastructure operators and bodies, could be energy agencies, could be energy service companies, as well as large property owners, including social housing organizations, could be retail chains, as well as services or industries. And here a specificity is that a single project proponent is eligible under the PDA call topic scope A. If we move on to the next slide, please. So what are we looking for actually? We look for project proposals under the PDA call topic, which deliver replicable solutions to accelerate sustainable energy investments. So Pierluca mentioned before the solutions on the ground, which enable this acceleration of sustainable energy. And to implement those or to generate those, the project proposals could focus on specific financial instruments and or the organizational innovation, but of course, always connected to the specific situation which you address to remove the existing market barriers. More specifically, on the next slide, please. The approach of a proposal could focus on the development of a financing scheme, which is focused on leveraging enhanced levels of private investment. So examples are energy performance contracting, blending private with public funds, financial instruments such as on-bill financing, on-tax payment schemes, and so on. But always with a clear focus on the scalability of these investment scheme, on this financing scheme. So in the setup of the scheme, you should aim for maximum scalability on a specific market in a specific country. And it should have a showcase dimension in a sense that it's innovative for the specific sector you are addressing. This could be combined, or this could be replaced by, the next slide please, the organizational innovation. So you could also focus in your proposed approach on the organizational innovation, how you mobilize the investment program. Examples for these could be project development units, could be large-scale bundling and pooling of different assets in a specific geographic scope. And this specific geographic scope could be a district level, a city level, or a wider geographic level. For the PDA specifically, one single country application is possible. So either or, no, and or organizational innovation, financial instruments, but always this has to be combined with, on the next slide, please, with high ambition levels of the actual implemented sustainable energy investment. So we clearly look for ambitious projects, and indicators for such ambitious projects could be deep renovation, nearly zero energy building standards, positive energy buildings or districts, or highly energy efficient infrastructure. So also in the ambition level, you should prove this showcase dimension of your approach under PDA. Next slide, please. In terms of the target sectors we try to address are existing residential buildings, including these large social housing operators, as mentioned before, existing non-residential buildings of public or commercial owners, building integrated renewables and other small-scale renewables, existing public infrastructure such as district heating networks or cooling networks, water or wastewater services, then also clean and energy efficient urban transportation infrastructure and low emission mobility solutions. But for all of these, and specifically for the mobility aspect, always consider that it has to be a showcase dimension. So a small mobility point in a national park is not sufficient under PDA. Then further target sectors would also be industry and services, for example, energy performance contracts to increase the energy efficiency of industrial production lines, as well as renewable energy communities and other citizen-led initiatives. Next slide, please. Regarding the framework conditions, the facts and figures. So the expected project size is 500,000 to 1.5 million euros per project, but that's not decisive. Then what is specific to the PDA called topic scope A is a leverage factor, which we require from the proposal proponents, meaning that for every €1 million of grant which you request, we request investments in sustainable energy of 15 million euros. For those projects which only focus on residential buildings, the leverage factor is 1 to 10 only. And another specificity of PDA is that the investments have to be launched, and we require proof from the projects that the investment is implemented during the course of the project. And this proof is could either be a signed contract with a contractor, or, for example, the published procurement document, so the tender. The last point I had already mentioned. Next slide, please. The expected impacts, I won't go into much detail. What I have already mentioned is the required investment. So that's that's one of the critical impacts we look at, the investments, the achieved energy savings. So here you have again the showcase dimensions. So regarding primary energy savings or renewable energy generation. Also then the decarbonization aspect of greenhouse gas emission reduction. And then you have a variety of other impacts which depend on the specific focus of your approach. So jobs created, increased skills, delivery of scalable financial solution, policy recommendations, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. There is a dedicated session on how to write a successful proposal, but for the PDA, specific factors are to be mentioned, which is the adequate starting point. Please make clear which barriers you face on your specific market sector and how the proposal is addressing those barriers. Then the clear concept. So how do you get from the initial project idea to the implementation of the investment with all the necessary steps in between? Then, of course, we look at the solid impact calculation. Please provide us with credible estimations and the sound baseline to assess the proposed impact. And then one of the critical things we detect frequently is the engagement of the stakeholders, so of the final beneficiaries, which are the asset owners, but also of key stakeholders which need to be involved in the whole process during the implementation, which could be public authorities, for example, or policy decision makers. On the next slide, I propose, or I give you an idea of successful PDA projects of the past funded under Horizon 2020. You can find detailed information about those projects on the Cordis platform. The link is down there at the slide. And with this, I would like to jump 2 slides further. Here you have the connection details to our diverse information channels, to our media channels, where you can also gather further information. And with that, I would like to thank you all for listening to my presentation. And I would hand over to Adrien now to cover the second scope under PDA.
Yeah, good morning from my side too. Can we have slides, please? Calvin. So, yeah, good morning. So I'll quickly present Scope B under the topic Project Development Assistance, which is quite specific and rather different than what we normally fund under the PDA topic. So if we move to the next slide, the focus here is on one-stop shops for public assets, and Pierluca presented a bit what is in the renovation wave, for example, where project development assistance and the implementation of one-stop shops are clearly mentioned as one of the key tools to increase the renovation rates. Here we're looking at the ones that will be targeting public buildings, but public facilities also in general. So could be, in many cases, it's street lighting, but it could be swimming pools, it could even be public water pumps, you name it. What is important here is that we have a long track record already of one-stop shops for the public assets. We have been funding them through the Intelligent Energy Europe program already back in 2011, then Horizon 2020 PDA. ENER, the ENER program has a lot of very good examples, and Live CET funding is now also funding them last year, and we are right now in the process of preparing grant agreements for that. What do we mean here by public asset, by one-stop shops? Is basically the idea that you provide integrated services to public entities. And here I'm not saying necessarily just public authorities, but it could be any type of public bodies that manages public assets. And the idea here is to really overcome the lack of capacity of small public entities. Basically, they don't have the staff, they don't have the skills, they don't have the money to develop investment projects. And so the idea of a one-stop shop is to really mutualize the experience and the knowledge and the know-how in one place that would be able to aggregate project and deliver at scale. Now, having said this, there are many ways to develop, to deliver one-stop shops. And that really depends to a large extent on the type of investments first, but also on how cooperation is implemented between this one-stop shop and the public entities that it's supporting. So if we move to the next slide, what do we mean now by a community of practitioners? I think the objective of this topic is really to support the existing one-stop shops and the one-stop shops that are in development and future one-stop shops that are not even yet in development, by creating a network, by putting people together in a community where they can talk to their peers, they can exchange, they can find out how people are answering to the same challenges, because ultimately, even though we have different member states and different regional contexts, everybody's different, but pretty much our experience also from funding this project over the past 10 years is that the issues that people are facing are very similar. And the solutions they come up with, they're always different, but there's always a lot of things that can be taken from another country, another region. So what we're expecting here is that there will be really this analysis and this promotion of best practices. And obviously our interest is that the ambition should not just be on the very easy changes, like putting in place building management systems, but going further, including building management systems, but focusing, for example, on deep renovation for buildings. So the one-stop shops that have been able to deliver more ambitious investment programs, and also with a focus on solutions that are involving private finance and that are scalable, because this is also a key challenge. What would be addressed within this community of practitioners? We give a few in the topic text. We give some hints of what we think should be addressed. First thing is what is the model of this one-stop shop? As I explained, there are many ways to do it, but basically identifying existing models so that people can better identify what they want to do if they want to develop a one-stop shops. How it is funded, how it is linking to existing funding programs, how it cooperates with the private sector. That's clearly a first type of activities, a first type of topics. Then there's the more operational aspects linked to methodologies, concrete tools. How do you optimize the process to support these public asset owners? Procurement is, public procurement here is central. So how do you streamline procurement processes? How do you standardize your documents? How do you aggregate buildings or assets from different building owners? Or within the same building owner, how do you set up projects where you reach a critical size more easily? So there's a lot of things there's a lot of experiences here and there, and we really want one project to look into that and to extract what are the key options. We think there's also things that could be done in terms of the skills, the training needs for replication. We are looking for, we want to expand the number of regions that have a one-stop shop active for public assets. So what are the needs to train public actors, but also to train the whole ecosystem, because it's also the consultants that are working for them, the technical consultants, the financial consultants, and so on. So really having a holistic view on the skills and the training needs. And then we think there's also a lot of work that could be done in extracting best practices around partnership with market actors. It's very clear that one-stop shops do not deliver all the investments by themselves. So how to better involve the construction sector, the ESCO sector, how to have partnerships with them is clearly a strand of work where we think there would be added value. Next slide, please. What should a good proposal have in terms of outcomes? So what should come out of your proposal? Well, clearly, as I said, consolidating the findings, but also proposing guidance and support to emerging one-stop shops. That is really important. And that this guidance should be taken into a large-scale capacity building program. What that capacity building program should do is should be targeting regional and national public entities. That when we say regional/national, the idea is that the critical size depend. I mean, there are critical sizes for setting up one-stop shops. It's clearly not at the level of a small town. Now, some regions in Germany are bigger than several member states, so it's really up to applicants to define that, and in the term of the project, this will be further defined, but really focus on the right territorial entities. We want this capacity building program to be not just calling people to a training in Brussels in English. We know that this is not adapted to most public authorities. So it has to be rolled out at national level. It has to be adapted also to the national context. It's not going to be the same actors. You're not talking about the same programs everywhere. So a lot of work needs to be done in order to make this concrete and accessible at the national level. And that involves clearly also training, including trainers at the national level, and engaging also with the right national networks to ensure that that this training is taken on board and is sustained after the end of the project. As I said, in terms of targets, it's public authority officials, but it's also staff of public bodies, energy agencies, consultants that are basically involved in developing and implementing all these energy renovation programs. And we're looking not just at classroom training, but we think a lot of this is learning by doing. So practical mentoring is certainly a good option to deliver this capacity building. Last point that should come out of all this is proposals to policymakers. We think it's important also to escalate what the challenges that are faced by these different initiatives to make sure that, if needed, legal frameworks can be adapted. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of coverage, what is really important here, where Scope A is clearly national, is clearly local, regional. Here, we want this community of practice to be transnational. So it has really to cover as many countries as possible. It should involve the most relevant experiences, and it should also reflect the diversity of situations and approaches across Europe. So we don't want a proposal that says, well, here's the solution, here's how you develop a one-stop shop, because we've done it, and we propose to train everybody to do what we've done. That we really want people who come with an open mind and will integrate all the different approaches, of course, highlighting the ones that are more ambitious and that allow to deliver more ambitious investments. Here, if you want to have a relevant application, to be clear, have at least 3 applicants from 3 different countries. Now, having said this, you don't need to have 27 27 partners. That's not necessarily the good way to go, but make sure that your governance within the project will be able to involve all of the relevant countries. A lot of things are valid at national level, less at EU level. So how you interact between the European and the national level is also something to look at and to develop and to explain in your application. We also make it clear in the topic text that there's space for one grant. The estimation is around 2 million euros, but there will be only one grant here. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of expected impacts, if you're writing a proposal here, make sure that you explain, what that community of practitioners will be. How will it be alive? How will you make it? How will you create it? And how will you sustain it? And here, the engagement and the participation of all stakeholders is really essential. Explain also how that will enhance the practices. So be concrete in terms of outputs. We will have reports looking at this and that. And if you're not able to say exactly what will be in the reports, clarify that, here's how we will identify exactly the topics and we'll deliver X, Y, Z studies and so on. As I said, large-scale capacity building, quantify your outcomes here, and then policy frameworks. As I said, this is not as easy to quantify, but to explain how your proposal will lead to that and how you will engage with policymakers. Last point. Can we have the next slide? There's a long list of KPIs here. I will not go through them, but just to be clear, you don't need to tick all the boxes here. But you should. Here you should try to address all these points because basically we're pretty prescriptive in terms of what comes out of this project. So I'll stop here and we'll take questions at the end.
Thanks a lot, Adrien. Indeed, we will take your questions at the end. I have not seen any in the chat yet, so please feel free to post them there. I would like to hand over to Martin now on the facilitation structures, please.
Thank you, Daniela, and also a very warm welcome from my side. My name is Martin Eibl, and I'm also working in the Live Energy, Live Climate team at CINEA. And I'm happy to present you today the topic on setting up facilitation structures to accelerate the renovation wave in the public sector. Adrien was talking about the community of practitioners in this field. So this topic is actually about supporting you to set up facilitation structures, which you may call one-stop shops or any other type of facilitation structures that are going to help us to achieve our to help the public sector to lead the energy transition, the clean energy transition, by renovating the public assets. Next slide, please. And we heard already a lot about the policy drivers. Of course, the most pertinent right now is REPowerEU with the situation we have in Europe and the dire need to not only switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy, but also, let's not forget energy savings and energy efficiency, because every kilowatt hour that is not used is actually the best energy we can generate. So in that sense, we need to push energy efficiency, and we do not have basically any more time to idle. We need to really accelerate the energy efficiency works in the public sector, and the public sector needs to really take the lead now. There are other frameworks such as the European Green Deal, and in particular the renovation wave, where we also have a target on doubling the renovation rate of buildings in the public sector as well. There is also another driver in the upcoming recast of the Energy Efficiency Directive, which foresees that the renovation rates in the public sector are now expanded not only touching on national buildings, national government buildings, but to all public buildings. So meaning also at local and regional levels. So that means there's a lot of push towards the public sector to deliver on reaping all the energy efficiency potentials in their assets. And that's why we decided to launch this topic, in particular to support the public authorities, the public sector in accelerating their efforts in renovation. Next slide, please. So it was already mentioned a little bit by Adrien. There is definitely a challenge in terms of capacity. We know that especially at local regional level, there's often not the capacity in public authorities that can actually develop project pipelines and implement them. So in that sense, we need to address this gap, and we need to provide and support the development of the skills in the local at local regional level to enable the municipalities, public authorities to deliver on the energy efficiency project pipelines. And it's very important, as I said, we need to upscale the ambitions in energy renovations. So that means both ways. I mean, the energy saving ambitions. So to make public buildings future-proof, not only going for low-hanging fruits, the 10–15%, but really trying to reap the full energy efficiency potential in the buildings, but also to upscale in terms of the numbers. So as I said before, we don't have the time to go slow pace now, but we need to really have large numbers of buildings renovated in a very quick time. So we need to also accelerate the energy renovations of public buildings. Next slide, please. So what are we looking for in our proposals? We are looking to support the establishment and operation of regional or national facilitation structures. I say regional, national, because as you can see on the second bullet point, we are not looking so much at having local facilitation structures that are covering only one administrative area, for example, one municipality, but we are really wanting to upscale. So that means we're looking at facilitation structures that are covering a larger territory, not only one city or one municipality, but really beyond that. So that's what we would like to support, and we would like to support you in establishing a solid governance model. We would like to help you to identify the mandate and get the mandate from your clients, the public authorities in your area, to be able to provide a good service to them, which they are tapping into it, and that there's a good relationship in this one. And also very importantly, we want to have sustainability of these facilitation structures. We have a lot of experience in terms of PDA, as Daniela described. Before that, we had already funded such projects under Intelligent Energy Europe. We have also the European Investment Bank, which is funding, I think, around over 100 projects across Europe to deliver project pipelines and to establish project development units. But what we have also seen from the past is that often these project development units are not really sustaining after the end of the action. So this topic is in particular focusing on developing a concept and a facilitation structure that is sustainable. So a lot of your work will also be to make sure that you have the buy-in from your stakeholders, from your politicians, maybe from the public authorities, to sustain the facilitation structures. And that is something you need to really showcase and demonstrate in your proposal how you will do that. Next slide. In terms of the service package we are envisaging here as well, and that's maybe also quite a difference to the PDA topic, because we want, in this facilitation structure topic, we want to give you the time and the resources to really look at your service package, what you can offer to the public authorities in order to accelerate and upscale the renovation of public assets. And there are a lot of aspects in a very good service package, which you can see here on this slide. One of them is to simplify, for example, decision-making in public authorities. Renovation take often very long time because of administrative barriers, of skills and capacity we already mentioned. Decision-making processes are complex sometimes. So we want the facilitation structures to reduce this complexity and propose solutions, make it easier for public authorities to do these renovations, to implement the renovations, and to stimulate demand for building renovation. So basically to show the business case of the renovation of public buildings, not only economically, but of course there are multiple benefits of energy efficient buildings, public office buildings, for example, and other public buildings. So I mean, that is what the facilitation structure should convey to the public authorities and try to stimulate their demand. And then it's also for the facilitation structure to identify and mobilize these public buildings. So to provide the resources, to provide to the public clients the service to identify the buildings, to handhold them basically through the process, and to suggest then really comprehensive energy refurbishments. And that should be cost-effective, deep renovation of buildings, ideally. As you can see, cost-effective is there, but so we'll be looking at cost-effective measures for sure, but with also an eye, or maybe even 1.5 eyes, I would say, on the deep renovation. So that means really ambitious energy savings. That's what we need now, because that is important for our Europe's decarbonization strategy. Next slide. And then, of course, you have also some complexity when it comes to building the project pipelines. What we really do not want so much is that you go one by one building, but we would really encourage to aggregate building renovation projects. That may then help you to also make a better business case and financial case, not only for your own treasury, but also for potentially private investors. So that's why we think that you also need to look at legal assistance, because often these bundling or pooling is not so straightforward, and there are also sometimes legal barriers. And for that, the facilitation structure should also include this kind of service to overcome these barriers in public administration, to bundle and to aggregate buildings. You should also look at efficient procurement processes, so that we really that we can really speed up the processes of delivering the renovation works. And of course, as was said already by my colleagues, the public purse is not going to be able to pay for all the renovation works. So we also want the facilitation structures to look at alternative financial schemes. So at financial instruments, market-based instruments, energy performance contracts, white certificates, whatever is in your national context possible, so that we can blend in the public finance. And for sure, there's a lot of European support money also going towards member states to deliver renovation works also in the public sector. But we want to enhance that by blending that also with private money, if possible, because there's also quite an appetite from private investors to invest into less risky and very solid investment projects. And a good bundle of energy efficiency projects can actually very much meet the bill of the private investors. You need to also not forget to engage with the relevant actors across the value chain. And that includes, of course, construction companies, architects, urban planners, financiers. One of the big gaps we will face is that there is a gap in the construction sector to deliver on the renovation works. So in that sense, a facilitation structure should have a 360-degree view around them to already make sure that there is the support and there is the capacity of the people who can help to deliver the investment projects and the renovation works. And finally, the facilitation structure should be a trusted structure by the public authorities. So in that sense, quality assurance is very key. Any good scheme fails with trust or non-trust, basically. So in that sense, you should also demonstrate in your proposal how you will improve or ensure this trustful relationships with the public clients and ensure quality assurance of your services and the works, the renovation works delivered at the end of the day. Next slide. So here we have in this topic, you may apply with a single applicant of one of the eligible countries for the LIFE program, or you can also apply with several applicants from one single eligible country. So that's possible in this topic. And the EU contribution, which we're looking for per proposal, is around 1 to 1.5 million, but it very much depends on what you're proposing. So it doesn't preclude any other amount. It very much depends on what you're offering in your proposal. Next slide. In terms of expected impacts, very clearly, we are, of course, looking at primary energy savings, renewable energy generated, about investments, about the additional amount you're leveraging into your area in terms of EU support, but also about private sources, and of course, the number of jobs. But and of course, the number of buildings with increased energy performance and the number of public authorities you're going to support with your facilitation structure. It's very important that you understand that we also want to see this facilitation structure operational. So before the end of the action, you should already have a pipeline of renovation projects ideally up and running. So in that sense, if you're unsure, I mean, just you bear in mind that you can set your project length. I mean, you don't have to be very fast. If you think that you need a bit more time, just program that into your proposal. There is no limitation in terms of the number of years you can put in your application. But I think it would be very, very important to have a phase of implementation in your proposal. So the operation, so that you can still adjust if you need to your service package, for example, to the public authorities, that you can test your service package, and that you can fine tune and improve it. And that you have at the end then a facilitation structure that is robust, that offers a compelling service, and that is sought after by the public authorities, by the public bodies in your targeted area. Next slide. And that's all from me on the facilitation structure. And if you have any questions, we are also around in the one-to-one matchmaking sessions now during the info day. You can actually ask a CINEA expert, and I'm also available. So if you need any further advice on this topic, facilitation structures, you can also find me in the marketplace. Otherwise, you have here a range of contacts where you can also contact us. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Martin. So as you can see, we have different options, different offers in our basket for you, depending on your specific perspective on how to support the acceleration of investments into sustainable energy. If I don't see any questions right now, are there any questions from the audience? So you have a dedicated slot now. We still have a couple more minutes until the planned end of our session. Please feel free to post your questions. In the meantime, I would like to refer you to our funding and tender portal, where you can find the 2 different call topics. So with PDA having 2 scopes. And there are all the additional informations, the template for the proposals and so on and so forth. And as mentioned before, the recording will then also be available of that specific info session here. Yeah, and my colleague just posts now, in case there are questions coming up later, please feel free to send them to us, to our functional mailbox. So there is a functional mailbox available as well, which is CINEA Live CET. And it's for sure somewhere in the presentation slides as well. So you can access that and send us individual questions at a later point.
We are also, maybe if I can add, we are also going to post some frequently asked questions later on. We wanted to wait for this info day to hear your questions, basically to formulate that. But you will also find on the funding and tender portal then for each of the clean energy transition topics dedicated FAQs in the upcoming weeks now, where we will post them.
Okay, so I will wait another minute for your questions. If there are none, I will close this session earlier. Thanks a lot for your participation. Happy to see you all in here. Thanks to my colleagues for their contributions. And we are happy to hear from you. Have a very nice day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.